Fragment 5 comes from Clement's Stromata 2.112.1. And in this fragment, Clement gives us first a paraphrase and then a quote that comes from Isidore's work on the excrescent soul. He begins with this paraphrase. Basilides' disciples are accustomed to calling the passions appendages. These exist as certain spirits, and in substance they exist as appendages latched onto the rational soul in accordance with an original disturbance and confusion. In turn, other bastard beings, made up of spirits and diverse natures, grow on these souls. For example, those of a wolf, monkey, lion, or goat, whose traits, they say, appear in the soul and assimilate the soul's desires closely to those of animals. Whatever traits they bear, they imitate the actions of these traits. Not only are they conformed to the urges and imaginations of unreasoning animals, they also zealously pursue the movements and beauties of plants, since they bear the appended traits of plants and the traits of their condition, like the hardness of steel. Isidore himself, the son of Basilides, shares the sentiments of this teaching in On His Excrescent Soul. As if accusing himself, he writes word for word, quote, "For whenever you give someone grounds that the soul is not single, the passions of the worst people surge by the violence of the appendages. For scoundrels will have no ordinary excuse, saying, 'I was forced, carried away, I acted involuntarily, I performed against my intention,' themselves taking a leading role in the lusts of wicked people and not fighting the violent forces of the appendages. It's necessary to become superior by virtue of our rationality and to be manifest as those who dominate the lesser creation in us." This whole discussion, including Clement's initial paraphrase, probably derives again from the book On the Excrescent Soul. When disturbance or confusion occurs in our lives, as it does quite often, that is when the passions like rage and jealousy latch onto us and become ingrained as habits. There might be a primal wound or trauma, and then the passions grow or spawn and grow on the basis of that wound. By his use of the term lesser creation, Isidore may hint that he was interpreting or at least alluding to Genesis 1:28, that famous passage in which we are commanded to rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, all cattle, the whole earth, and every crawler which crawls on the earth. In short, one must dominate the animals. This sounds terribly anthropocentric and arrogant, and it is. In antiquity, however, animals here were commonly allegorized to refer to human passions. Before quoting this fragment, Clement himself commented that the scripture knows that pleasure lovers and body lovers are more beasts than people, since they have likened themselves to cattle. Later, he comments that we have been commanded not only to dominate the beasts outside, but also the wild passions in our very selves. Isidore could not have agreed more. Philo advised that humans should rule over birds, by which he meant flighty and arrogant people, and they should rule over reptiles, which are symbols of poisonous passions. For through every soul, sense, pleasures, and desires, and grief and fear creep, stabbing, piercing, and wounding. The rhetoric of identifying vicious people with animals was widespread. Epictetus, in his dissertations, wrote that it is because of this kinship with the flesh that some of us who incline toward it become like wolves, perfidious, treacherous, noxious creatures, or others like lions, wild, savage, and untamed creatures, or in most cases like foxes, or something even more ignominious and base. For what else is a slanderous and ill-natured person than a fox, or something even more unfortunate and base? Watch out then, and take care that you don't end as one of these wretched creatures. The language of appendages isn't an invention of Isidore. It's a fairly common philosophical way of talking about the passions. Both Stoics and Platonists used this term or synonym to talk about those parts of us which are not our true selves. Platonists were told that affections connected with mortality would attach themselves to people on the basis of the body. And what they meant by this is, first of all, sensations, and then things like pleasure, pain, and fear and anger. Souls which achieved dominance over these affections would live justly and return to their kindred star in the sky, while others who had been overcome by injustice would come on their second birth to the life of a woman, and if they did not mend their ways at that stage, would come ultimately to the nature of a wild beast. Plotinus identified the mortal body itself as an appendage that can be distinguished and even removed from the true self. And the idea of appendages recalls Plato's image of the sea god Glaucus, whose body is so covered by seaweed and barnacles that he looks more like a monster than his natural self. So, in order for the soul to retain or reattain its beauty, it must strip off these barnacles. According to Isidore, the appendages seem to be more or less equivalent to spirits. The fact that these spirits are bastard or illegitimate indicates their evil nature. The bastard nature of these spirits may allude to the story in 1 Enoch, according to which angels have sex with human women to produce a bastard race of giants, and although these giants are killed with lightning, their spirits remain on earth as evil daimones or demons. The book of 1 Enoch was, we know, very influential in Alexandria. Possession by evil spirits was not a distinctly Christian idea. It was something that educated Platonists and Hermetists of this period believed in. Porphyry wrote that the soul is either a residence of gods or of daimones. And according to the Hermetica, in Corpus Hermeticum 16, thoughts are good when the mind receives God's seed, but thoughts are bad when it receives the seed of some daimon. Such a daimon sneaks in and sows the seed of its own energy, and consciousness becomes pregnant with what is sown: adulteries, murders, violence against fathers, and so on. Now, reading Clement, one might think that it was actual animal spirits who attacked the human soul, but for Isidore, it seems these spirits are simply animalic. They have animal traits, and they transmit these traits to humans. As Epictetus already indicated, wolves and lions were known for being treacherous and rapacious or savage. The goat was thought to be licentious, and monkeys had, it was thought, a mischievous temperament. In the context of quoting Isidore, Clement also quoted Valentinus, who spoke of daimones invading the heart and treating it abusively like an inn. These daimones are cast out by the Father's luminous visitation. When dealing with passions and spirits, Isidore puts all of the responsibility on the human self. They must never make excuses, but use their rationality, here logistikon, to dominate the animalic spirits within. It's hard, therefore, to see how Isidore accuses himself, to use Clement's language. By emphasizing human responsibility, Isidore makes the very point that Clement often wanted to make. It's Clement who seems to think that Isidore thinks like the scoundrels he mentions, that the fact of appendages gets them off the hook for their beastly behavior. Yet Isidore will have none of it. Appendages or not, people are responsible for ruling their inner animal. It's unclear how evil spirits inspire a likeness to plant, and the example given, the hardness of steel, is not helpful because that's not a plant characteristic. But interestingly, Plotinus did say that in many respects we live like plants, and what he meant is that we have the faculty of growth and reproduction, and some people never really accomplish anything more than that. Isidore acknowledges the appendages, but he does not see them as an excuse for bad behavior. By calling them appendages, he highlights the fact that they are not essential to the soul. They are a foreign growth. Rationality allows the true self to dominate these passions, the lesser creation in us. The human soul might not be completely unified in one, but it is still free and able to control its inferior aspects or growths. So Isidore and Clement are in full agreement about the necessity of self-control. And in Platonic theory, self-control occurs when the dominant part, the reason, controls the inferior part, the unruly desires located in the belly and genitals. It is Clement who says that Isidore believed in two souls. There's in fact no evidence that Isidore put it this way. Even if he did use such language, he would not have considered the appendage soul to be a true soul, but a false attachment that can be stripped away.